I had just stepped out of the bath, the steam still clinging to my skin like a warm whisper, when he knocked on my door. "Mom," his voice came, low but steady. Too steady, perhaps, like someone rehearsing lines. I tightened the towel around myself. "Yes. Can I talk to you about something?" He paused. "Something school-related." I opened the door slowly, peering at him through the haze of rising steam. He was standing awkwardly, one hand resting on the doorframe, the other clutching a textbook. He looked older these days, sharper jawline, a permanent furrow in his brow from all-night study sessions, that air of confidence medical students wear like armor. But I still saw the boy he used to be.
My boy.
"What's going on?" I asked. He hesitated. "It's anatomy. The exam is in 2 days. I've been reviewing everything, but something's been bothering me." I stepped aside and gestured him in. "Come on, tell me." He sat at the edge of my bed, flipping the textbook open to a glossy diagram of the male reproductive system. He tapped on the page with a frustrated sigh. "It's just, I don't match this," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I mean, not exactly. And I know we're taught to expect variation, but I don't know. What if something's wrong?" I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean you don't match it?" He flushed, cheeks burning. "I mean structurally, functionally, visually, everything." The air felt thick again, not from the bath steam, but something else. Something heavier. I sat beside him, careful to keep the towel tight around my chest, my heart now thudding with concern. "Well," I said slowly, trying to stay clinical, "variation is normal. You know that. But if you're worried about something specific, the best thing would be to have it evaluated." "I thought about that," he said, still not meeting my eyes. "I mean, I could go to someone at school, but they're strangers. And you're a urologist." I froze. He finally looked up, his eyes searching mine. "I trust you." That word wrapped itself around my ribs like a ribbon, beautiful and dangerous. I nodded, slowly. "If it's worrying you that much, you can schedule an appointment. We'll handle it professionally." "Okay." He exhaled, shoulders dropping. "Okay. Thanks." He stood, his eyes flickering to the damp towel I was clutching. "I didn't mean to bother you while you were relaxing." "You didn't," I said quickly, too quickly. "I'm glad you told me. I'm proud of you." He smiled, the boyish kind that always unraveled something in me. "Okay. I'll check your schedule and book something?" "Yes," I said, standing now, feeling the heat returning to my face. "Do that." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me in the quiet wake of something I couldn't name. The moment the door clicked shut, I sat on the bed, towel still clutched to my chest, my skin cooling rapidly. My mind reeled, not because of the medical concern, but because of how his voice had changed when he said, "I trust you," and how my stomach had turned in a way that had nothing to do with worry. This wasn't how things were supposed to feel. I'd always been proud of the closeness we shared. It had grown even more over the last 2 years, ever since my husband began fading out of our lives, one business trip at a time. The house, once filled with shared routines and predictable footsteps, had become 2 islands, him in hotel lobbies and airport lounges, me in clinics and conference halls. And then there was my son. He filled the silence in ways I hadn't even realized I needed. His presence wasn't demanding, it was grounding. He noticed things. He brought me coffee when I worked late. He asked about my day when no one else did. And sometimes, in moments I didn't admit even to myself, I caught myself waiting for his key in the door. Waiting for him to bring life back into the quiet rooms of this house. But now there was a shift. Something had passed between us in that conversation. Not a touch, not a word, but something unseen and undeniable. I was a urologist. I was a mother. I had spent my life breaking down walls, examining the most vulnerable parts of the human body without flinching. But this was different. This was him. And worse, this was me, sitting here in a towel, wondering what I'd just agreed to, wondering why my breath still hadn't settled. Tomorrow, he would book that appointment. Tomorrow, I would be a doctor again. But tonight, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know. He scheduled the appointment for Friday afternoon. I saw the notification pop up in the clinic's portal like it was any other case. Just a name, a time slot, and a note. Concern regarding anatomical abnormality. Requesting maternal consult. It was clinical. Cold. Just as I taught him to be with patients, professional, detached. But reading it made my hands tremble slightly on the mouse. The day of the appointment, I found myself moving through work like a ghost, checking scans, scribbling notes, washing my hands a dozen times though they were already clean. When the receptionist poked her head in and said, "Your 3 o'clock is here," my heart skipped. I nodded, trying not to show anything. "Send him in." He stepped into the room like he belonged there, wearing that confident, slightly nervous smile he always wore before big exams. White t-shirt. Jeans. A little too casual for a clinic, but I didn't say anything. He looked around the office, then back at me. "You sure this is okay?" I forced a small smile. It's a routine check. Nothing unusual for me. But of course it wasn't routine. I asked him to sit. I asked the same questions I would ask anyone. I could hear my own voice echoing in my ears, sterile and precise. Duration of concern? A few months. Pain? No. Just doesn't match diagrams. Functional changes? He hesitated. Sometimes. During arousal. It's different. The word arousal lodged in the air like a thorn. I stood, gloved up, heart racing. "All right. I'll examine you. Stand behind the curtain and change. I'll give you privacy." He obeyed, without hesitation. I turned away, focusing on the tray. Alcohol wipes, gloves, light, gauze, pretending not to feel the silence thickening behind the curtain. After a moment, I heard his voice. "I'm ready." When I pulled the curtain aside, my eyes met his, then slowly dropped. He stood with the paper gown loose around his waist, his body rigid, uncertain. "Lie down," I said gently. He obeyed, and I began the examination. At first, it was textbook. My hands moved with practiced confidence, every motion guided by science, not sentiment. But the moment I touched him, something shifted. His breath caught. I paused. "Did that hurt?" "No," he said quickly. "Just unexpected." I tried again, more cautiously. "Tell me if anything feels off." He didn't respond. His body remained still, but his heart, it was pounding. I could feel it through my gloves. And worse, so was mine. Then it happened. He whispered, barely audible. "Does it seem normal to you?" His tone was different, low, quiet, not like a student or a son. I looked up, startled, and our eyes met. Something passed between us. A spark. A moment I hadn't prepared for. A line I had never considered crossing, even in thought. "It's within the range of normal," I said, voice tight. "You're healthy." His eyes didn't leave mine. Then why do I feel so different? I froze. The air between us was no longer clinical. It was charged, electric, terrifying. I backed away, pulling off my gloves, my heart hammering. "You're fine," I said. "I think we're done." He sat up slowly. "Mom, don't," I said, my voice shaking now. This was a medical exam. That's all it was. But we both knew it wasn't. He nodded, standing to dress behind the curtain, silent now. When he emerged, his face was unreadable. "Thanks," he said, as if this had been any other appointment. But as he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said quietly. I trust you more than anyone." I couldn't speak. The door closed behind him, and I stood there, still in my lab coat, staring at the place where he had just been, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the moment replayed in my mind, his body on that cold exam table, his voice quiet and unsure, the weight of his gaze locking with mine. And the spark, that impossible, undeniable spark I had tried to smother with logic and white latex gloves. It was like trying to ignore a fire flickering just beneath the skin. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the house, the sound of his footsteps in the hallway, the distant creak of the floorboards as he moved around his room. My heart was loud in my ears, and I hated it. This rush of thoughts, of questions I wasn't supposed to ask. He was my son, but he wasn't a child anymore. He was 21. A man. A man with questions, with curiosity, with vulnerability he had never shown to anyone but me. And I had seen him, really seen him, like no one else had. The next morning, I stood at the kitchen counter, staring blankly at my coffee. I hadn't showered. I hadn't eaten. My white robe was knotted too tight, as if I could cinch these thoughts out of my body. He entered the room quietly. "Morning," he said, his voice a little hoarse. I nodded. "Sleep okay?" He hesitated. "Not really." Something was off. He leaned against the fridge, arms crossed over his chest, his eyes on me, but not fully focused. "I need to talk to you," he said. I turned, heart tightening. "What is it?" He shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "Since last night, something's been different. It feels like there's pressure. A little pain. And it won't go away." I blinked. "Pain? Where exactly?" He gave me a look, then glanced downward. I swallowed. "Did it start right after the exam?" He nodded. "Yeah. Not sharp, just tense. And it feels like there's tightness. Like, you know." He paused, searching for the right word, his cheeks flushing. "Like it's a little hard. And I didn't do anything." I stood there frozen, coffee growing cold in my hand. 1,000 possibilities swirled in my head. Vascular reaction, nerve sensitivity, psychological tension. But underneath it all, a whisper I didn't want to hear. I set the mug down. "Okay," I said gently. "We'll need to check again. It could be nothing. Maybe just overstimulation or anxiety." He nodded slowly. "Okay. But can you be the one to check? I don't want anyone else." My breath hitched. I looked at him, really looked. The lines of his face were sharper now. His eyes, so familiar and yet different, watched me not with the helplessness of a boy, but with the heavy trust of a man who had chosen me to carry the secret. "I'll check it," I said finally. "But later, not here. Come to the clinic again. After hours." He nodded. "Thank you." I didn't know who else to ask. And with that, he walked out, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen, clutching my robe like it could shield me from what was coming. I wasn't just worried now. I was trembling because a part of me, the part that should have shut down completely, wasn't afraid of seeing him again. It was afraid of how much I wanted to. That day, I couldn't concentrate on anything. My hands went through the motions, typing notes, prescribing treatments, listening to patients. But my thoughts were miles away, orbiting around a single point, 6:30 p.m. After hours, when it would be just him and me in the clinic. The minutes crawled. Every time I checked the clock, I found myself hoping he wouldn't come. And every time I caught myself hoping that, I hated myself for lying. By the time the office emptied and the last nurse waved goodbye, I was already pacing. I'd told him to come in the back in trance. Less chance of anyone seeing him. Less risk. Less explanation. The moment the door clicked open, I felt it. His presence. Calm. Steady. Too steady. He entered quietly, eyes scanning the room like he was measuring the air itself. "Hi," he said, voice soft. "Hi," I replied, suddenly breathless. He sat again on the same exam table. The same white paper crinkled beneath him. Same walls, same instruments. But everything else felt different. He was carrying something now, an awareness. A question neither of us dared voice. I turned to the counter and busied myself with gloves and sanitizer. I needed to anchor myself in the ritual of routine. The sterile familiarity of process. "You said it's still painful?" I asked without turning. "A little better," he replied. "But the tightness is still there. And, yeah, still that same pressure." I finally turned to face him. He was already removing his shirt, folding it neatly on the chair beside the table. I tried not to notice the definition in his arms, the subtle way he'd filled out in the last year.
But it was impossible not to.
He wasn't the lanky teen I'd driven to orientation 3 years ago. He was fully formed. He looked at me, eyes steady. Should I lie down again? I nodded. He adjusted himself on the table, pulling the sheet over his hips. I drew the curtain, not because it shielded him, but because it shielded me from myself. The room was so quiet I could hear the sound of his breathing and mine. I put on the gloves, each snap sharp in the air. Just let me know if anything hurts, I murmured. He nodded. I began. This time, I moved slower, more deliberately. My fingers were light but careful, tracing the areas he described, gently palpating for swelling or sensitivity. His body tensed as I touched him, not from pain, something else. Something more internal. You're warm, I said before I could stop myself. Yeah, he said, barely above a whisper. So are you. I paused, my hand midair. That one sentence fractured something between us. I looked at him then, and he looked at me, and neither of us looked away. Do you feel that? I asked, voice trembling. Yes, he whispered. And that was when I realized. We weren't just in a room anymore. We were standing on a ledge, something vast and uncertain yawning beneath us. What had begun as medical was now charged with something raw, human, electric. I cleared my throat, stepped back quickly, and pulled off the gloves like they were on fire. You're okay, I said, my voice too fast. There's no physical issue. I think it's tension-related. He sat up, holding the sheet around his waist. So nothing's wrong? Not physically, I repeated. But I'd recommend you try to release some of that tension. Go for a run. Do breathing exercises. Focus on school. He gave a soft smile, like he saw through my words. Okay, if you say so. I turned away again, heart pounding, face burning. I heard him dressing behind me. I waited until I heard the zipper of his backpack. I'll see you at home, he said. I nodded, but didn't look back. The door closed, and I sat down in the exam chair, pressing my hands into my lap to stop them from shaking.
This wasn't about anatomy anymore.
Something deeper had awakened between us. Something neither of us could name, but both of us felt. He didn't come down for dinner that night. I cooked anyway, mechanically, out of habit. Pasta with garlic and herbs. Simple. Comforting. My hands moved through the motions, but my chest felt hollow, like someone had knocked the air out of me and walked away. The house was quiet except for the clink of my fork against the plate. I tried to eat. I couldn't. And then, just as I was about to take my plate to the sink, I heard his footsteps. He stood at the edge of the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes shadowed in the dim light. I need to talk to you, he said. Something in his voice made me stop. I set the plate down. Okay. He didn't sit. He leaned against the wall, like he needed the support. His face was pale. Tense. I don't know how to say this, he began. So, I'm just going to say it. I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. I think I've been confused.